I still remember the exact moment her hands trembled. We were standing at gate B6, and my grandmother was clutching her boarding pass envelope with both hands. Except, there was nothing inside. "Emma," she whispered, voice cracking. "He said there was no ticket for me." And then my dad turned away like she was a mistake he could erase. Like the 20 she gave them meant nothing. That was Thanksgiving. They boarded the flight to Europe. I stayed behind with her. I never regretted it. 3 weeks later, when they returned from Paris and strolled through arrivals laughing, they froze. Because I was standing there, right beside a man in a dark gray suit, and in his hand was a folder that would change everything. This is the story of betrayal, of a woman who gave everything, and of what happens when someone finally says, enough. Growing up, I never really felt like I belonged to my family. My dad, Charles Whitmore, was a real estate agent, obsessed with image. My mom, Deborah, was more concerned with diet plans and social rankings than actual emotions. Family dinners were scripted performance, small talk, critiques, silence. But there was one person who made life feel like sunlight: my grandma, Lillian. She was my dad's mother, a retired school teacher who lived in a modest one-story home in Meridian. Every summer, she'd take me in like I was her own daughter. While my parents jetted off on adult-only cruises, I spent warm afternoons baking cinnamon bread, watering her hydrangeas, and falling asleep on the couch to her humming old Billie Holiday tunes. She was gentle but sharp, kind but firm. When I cried about not being invited to my cousin's birthday party, she taught me how to paint instead. When my parents scolded me for getting a B in math, she said, "Grades measure numbers, not worth." She saved everything I made, every clumsy drawing, every birthday card. Her fridge was covered in my childhood. And even as I grew older, moved away, and became a nurse in Boise, I never stopped visiting. Because Grandma never stopped loving me. Unlike my parents, she never made me feel like I had to earn her affection. And, deep down, I always feared they resented that bond. That maybe they saw her softness toward me as a threat. They never said it out loud. But I could see it in the way my father's jaw tensed whenever Grandma praised me. Or how Mom's smile thinned whenever I chose to spend the holidays with Grandma instead of flying to Aspen. Still, I told myself, they wouldn't hurt her. Not her. I was wrong. That Thanksgiving, when they came to her house with suitcases, smiles, and promises of a family trip to Europe, I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe that, maybe for once, they meant to include her. But even then, a part of me was holding its breath. Because love in my family always came with strings. And Grandma? She never saw the strings tightening. It started with wine, pie, and compliments that felt a little too rehearsed. We were gathered around Grandma's small mahogany dining table. She had made her famous sweet potato casserole, and the room smelled like cinnamon and roasted turkey. Everyone was smiling too much, laughing too easily. I knew that laugh. It was the one my father used when he was trying to close a sale. "I was thinking," Dad said between bites, "how amazing it would be to take this family somewhere special. You know, Europe, all of us. Rome, Paris, London, one unforgettable adventure." Grandma blinked, surprised. "Oh, that sounds lovely. But I don't know if my joints could handle all the walking." "That's the beauty of it," he beamed. "We'd take it slow. You'd have your own seat, wheelchairs available. We'd stay in hotels with elevators, room service a luxury. Mom." My Aunt Dana jumped in, nodding. "Mom, you've never been out of the country. This is your chance." Even my cousins, Brooke and Tyler, who barely looked up from their phones all night, muttered something like, "Yeah, it'd be cool." I looked over at Grandma. She was quiet, stirring her tea slowly. Then Dad added, as if casually, "We just need a bit more for bookings. Deposits are due next week. The rest is covered." My stomach tightened. "How much is a bit more?" I asked, keeping my tone even. He smiled. "Only 20. I figured Grandma could contribute. She's always wanted us to travel as a family." The room fell silent for a second. Then Grandma smiled weakly. Well, if it brings everyone together. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Because Grandma looked happy, hopeful, like a child waiting to be chosen for the first time. And after a lifetime of being sidelined by her own children, I think she finally believed they saw her again. She called the bank the next morning. I overheard her giving account numbers. I stood in the hallway, fists clenched. I should have stopped her. I should have asked her to wait, to question why it was her who had to pay when no one else seemed to lift a finger. But all I said was, Grandma, are you sure? She patted my hand. Honey, they're finally including me. It's worth every penny. Every part of me wanted to believe her. But something in the way Dad hugged her goodbye too quick, too distracted, left a cold pit in my stomach. This wasn't a gift. It was a transaction. And Grandma didn't realize she was the one being sold short. The morning of our flight to Europe, Grandma was ready before anyone else. She wore her navy cardigan with gold buttons and the same black flats she always called her travel shoes, though she hadn't traveled in years. Her suitcase was small, almost embarrassingly so, the kind you'd pack for a weekend trip, not a 3-week European tour. I packed light, she said proudly, so I wouldn't slow anyone down. I gave her a soft smile, but inside, my stomach was in knots. At the airport, everything moved quickly. Dad took charge, checking passports and barking directions like a general on a mission. Aunt Dana fluttered about, fussing over her neck pillow and overpriced water bottles. No one really talked to Grandma. We wheeled her suitcase behind us toward the international departures area. She looked around in quiet awe like a kid at a theme park, taking it all in. I've never seen an airport this big, she whispered, holding onto my arm. We reached the check-in desk. That's when it started. Dad's voice changed sharp, tense, hushed. I heard him muttering to the airline clerk. Phrases like, not on the manifest and, must be a system error. I stepped closer. What's going on? I asked. Dad turned, feigning calm. There's a mix-up. Looks like Grandma's ticket didn't go through. But it's fine, we'll figure it out. Grandma's smile faded. Charles, what do you mean my ticket didn't go through? He avoided her eyes. It's probably a website glitch. These things happen. But with timing, I don't think we can fix it now. Aunt Dana chimed in, shrugging. Maybe it's for the best, Mom. The flight is long. Europe's a lot of walking. You said yourself your knees have been aching. Grandma blinked. Her hands tightened around the handle of her little suitcase. But I paid. I gave you the money, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. My father gave a strained smile. Of course. And we're all going because of your generosity. But you should rest, Mom. We'll bring you back gifts, photos, stories. And then just like Faith turned and walked toward the gate. No apology. No hug. Just dismissal. I stood frozen. My heart pounded in my chest like a war drum. Around us, other families hugged, laughed, snapped photos. And we stood still, just me and my grandmother, and a suitcase that suddenly felt far too small. She looked at me, blinking slowly. There's no ticket for me, she murmured again, as if saying it aloud might change something. I reached for her hand. Then I'm not going either. She tried to protest, her voice trembling. Emma, you've been dreaming of this trip. No, I said, not without you. And just like that, they boarded a plane to Europe. And we walked quietly back through the airport doors, into the cold November wind. The drive home was wordless. Grandma sat in the passenger seat, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She didn't cry, she didn't rage. She just stared out the window like she was watching someone else's life pass by. When we got back to her house, she walked straight to her favorite chair by the window, unzipped her suitcase, and began unpacking with slow, methodical movements. Folded sweaters. A small bottle of lavender lotion, a passport that had never been used. I stood in the doorway, unsure if I should say something or just let her pretend nothing happened. Instead, I walked to the kitchen and made her chamomile tea. When I returned, She was holding an old photo of her, Dad, and Aunt Dana at a beach decades ago. The edges were worn, the colors faded, but her smile in that picture was bright and fearless. I really thought, maybe this time, they meant it, she said quietly. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The anger in my throat was too thick to speak through. Later that night, after she'd gone to bed, I sat alone at the dining table. My laptop glowed dimly in the dark. I typed one search term, almost instinctively: Elder Financial Abuse Laws, Idaho. Page after page of legal articles, statistics, and hotline numbers appeared. I clicked on one link: Office of Elder Protection, Inheritance Rights, Boise Division. There it was clear as day. If a senior citizen is coerced, deceived, or manipulated into transferring assets under false pretenses, it may qualify as financial exploitation. I copied down the number. The next morning, Grandma was in the garden. She wore her knit gloves and was pruning dead leaves off her rose bushes. I walked out and handed her a mug of coffee. You don't have to pretend you're okay, I said softly. She gave me a tired smile. I'm not pretending, sweetheart. I just don't want to make it harder for you. It's already hard, I admitted. But doing nothing? That's harder. She looked down at the petals in her palm. They're still my children. I know, I whispered. But you're my family, and I won't let them do this to you. She didn't answer, but that night, I called the number. A receptionist transferred me to someone named Victor Hensley, a lawyer with the Office of Elder Protection. Tell me everything, he said, his voice calm, deliberate. So I did. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel helpless. Victor Hensley didn't look like what I expected. He wasn't cold or overly formal. When he arrived at Grandma's house the next afternoon, he wore a gray blazer, jeans, and a warm expression that didn't feel rehearsed. He shook Grandma's hand gently and sat on the edge of the armchair like someone visiting an old friend, not investigating a crime. Mrs. Whitmore, he began, Emma has told me about the incident. I know this isn't easy, but I want you to understand what happened at that airport wasn't just hurtful. It may also be illegal. Grandma shifted uncomfortably, clutching her teacup. I don't want any trouble, she said softly. They're my family. Victor nodded, as if he'd heard that 100 times. I understand, but I'm here to protect you. What they did coercing you into giving them 20-0 under false pretenses, then abandoning you meets the criteria for elder financial exploitation. I watched her eyes flicker. Doubt? Guilt? Shame? So I spoke. Grandma, you gave them that money because they promised something they never intended to deliver. That's not generosity. That's theft wrapped in sentiment. Victor leaned forward. With your permission, I'd like to help recover your funds and protect your legal rights. We'll need to gather documentation, your bank statements, any texts, voicemails, witnesses, if possible. She hesitated. Then, for the first time since the airport, she said something firm. All right, if Emma believes this is right, then I trust her. That was all we needed. Over the next week, Victor and I worked like a quiet storm. We went to her local bank. The manager, a woman named Sharon, had known Grandma for years and turned pale when we explained what had happened. She printed the statement showing a transfer of 20-0 to an account under my father's name. We returned to the airport and found the same agent who'd handled our check-in, Marissa, a young woman with short braids and a sharp memory. Oh yeah, she said, eyes narrowing. I remember that older woman. She looked lost. Her son said her health made her a risk for the flight, and they told her to go home. It felt wrong. Cold. She agreed to provide a written statement. Each piece of the puzzle made it harder to breathe and easier to act. Back at Grandma's house, I helped Victor scan documents while Grandma made us grilled cheese sandwiches, pretending none of this was happening. But I could see the shift in her. She didn't flinch when Victor used words like civil case or revocation of inheritance. She even said, while slicing tomatoes, maybe it's time they realized I'm not just some wallet in a rocking chair. Victor smiled. I'd say you're a pretty powerful woman, Mrs. Whitmore. She blushed like a schoolgirl. A few days later, Victor looked up from his laptop and said calmly, Emma, we're ready. Ready for what? I asked. He closed his folder and met my eyes. For when they come back. 3 weeks later, they came back. I knew the flight number. Victor had pulled the itinerary from the travel agency's booking history purchased, of course, using Grandma's money. I didn't tell her I was going. She was at home that morning, tending to her small rosebush by the porch. I told her I had errands in town. She just smiled and handed me her shopping list, not knowing I had something else planned entirely. I arrived at Boise International Airport early, standing by the arrivals gate with Victor beside me. He wore a darker suit this time, no blazer, just sharp lines and the kind of calm that made people nervous. He carried a plain manila folder. Inside were copies of the bank statements, Marissa's written statement, and a court-authorized summons approved just 2 days earlier. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Pending civil restitution. Inheritance suspension request. Then I saw them. My father emerged first, rolling 2 oversized suitcases with stickers from Rome and Paris. My mother followed, her hair perfectly blown out and her nails freshly done. Aunt Dana wore sunglasses indoors and snapped selfies with Brooke and Tyler, who were both laughing at something on TikTok. They looked happy, untouched, like nothing had ever happened. Until they saw me. I stepped forward without a word. Victor walked beside me. Charles Whitmore, he said firmly. Dana Brooks. This is for you. He handed my father and aunt each a copy of the summons. They both stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. What is this? Dad stammered. Victor remained calm. Legal notice of investigation regarding financial abuse of Lillian Whitmore. You are required to respond within 7 business days. Failure to comply may result in a formal lawsuit. Aunt Dana ripped off her sunglasses. Are you serious? This is insane. She gave us that money? Victor raised an eyebrow. Under documented misrepresentation. That's not generosity, that's fraud. My father's face darkened. Emma, you did this? I nodded. You're suing your own family? No, I said evenly. I'm protecting mine. You made her believe you wanted to include her, and then you humiliated her at the gate like she was disposable. She's old, Mom snapped. That trip would have been hard on her. But not hard on her bank account? I cut in. They stood in stunned silence. Then Aunt Dana spat. You've always been dramatic. Victor stepped between us. This conversation is over. We'll see you in mediation. And just like that, we turned and walked away. But before I left, I looked over my shoulder just once. And I saw their faces. No joy. No power. Just panic. They didn't show up for the first mediation meeting. Victor said he wasn't surprised. People like them usually think silence will make us go away. It didn't. Instead, the judge granted a default ruling in Grandma's favor. Full restitution, 20. 0 returned within 30 days. But that wasn't all. Based on the evidence of intentional deception and emotional harm, the court placed a hold on all inheritance claims tied to her estate. A formal recommendation was submitted. Revocation of all familial inheritance rights related to my father, my aunt, and their spouses. When I brought the ruling papers home, Grandma sat at the kitchen table, turning them over slowly in her hands. They really did this, she murmured, not in disbelief, more like quiet confirmation of something she'd tried not to believe for too long. I'm sorry it had to come to this, I said gently. She looked up at me and smiled, small, sad, but somehow lighter. No, sweetheart, I'm sorry I let it go on this long. That night, she called Mr. Hendrickshire, estate attorney from years ago. I listened from the hallway as she gave him clear, unwavering instructions. I'd like to update my will, she said. Yes, I want to remove Charles and Dana. Completely. No portion. They've had enough. Later, when we were sitting on the porch with mugs of cocoa, she told me, I'm not doing this out of anger, Emma. I just want peace. And peace means not giving people more chances to hurt you. I nodded. I knew exactly what she meant. In the weeks that followed, I helped her close a joint account she'd opened with my father years ago. We transferred her savings into a new protected trust. She insisted I be listed as her financial advocate. I want you to take care of things if I can't, she said. You'll always be able to, I whispered back. But inside, I knew better. Something in her had changed, not just the disappointment, but the years of longing finally giving way to acceptance, not bitterness, just clarity. We returned to routines, slowly. Gardening, grocery trips, baking too many cookies we didn't need. But something new bloomed, too. She started sketching again, doodles of tulips, hills, and birds. I signed us up for a watercolor class at the community center, and she agreed, after some grumbling. It's never too late to start again, she said one morning, pressing the brush against the canvas. And it wasn't. We had started over. Just the two of us. No pretense, no performance, no more waiting for apologies that would never come. Only presence, only truth. And, in that space, Grandma wasn't a victim. She was free. The following spring, I planted yellow tulips all along the fence of Grandma's yard. She once told me, when I was 8, that yellow tulips meant hope, not joy hope. Joy comes and goes, she said. But hope is what you keep alive, even when everything else fades. I wanted her to see that hope again every morning when she opened the curtains. By May, the garden bloomed into a sea of soft gold. Grandma stood on the porch in her worn cardigan, coffee in hand, and just stared. She didn't say anything, but her eyes glistened. I figured you needed something to look forward to, I said. She squeezed my hand. I already do, honey. You. That summer, I made a decision. I applied to Idaho State University's master's program in gerontology and elder advocacy. I wanted to be the voice for others like her, like so many whose stories never reached courtrooms or community centers. When I told her, she teared up. I always knew you'd take care of people, just never imagined you'd start with me. I smiled. You're the reason I even know how to care. Life moved forward, not without shadows, but with a steadier light. Grandma made friends in her painting class. People who loved her stories, who didn't care about bank accounts or bloodlines, just kindness. She even sold a few paintings at the local crafts fair, one of them titled Gate B6. She never told anyone what it meant, but I knew. Occasionally, we'd get mail addressed from Aunt Dana or my parents, cards, vague attempts at reconnecting. We never opened them. Grandma would just slide them into a drawer labeled unanswered and return to her book or her tea. They never apologized, never tried to return the money, never asked how she was. And eventually, we stopped expecting they would. 2 years passed. Then one autumn morning, I found Grandma sitting quietly by the window, wrapped in her favorite quilt. She looked peaceful, but tired in a way I hadn't seen before. I'm just a little slower these days, she whispered. But the tulips will come back next spring, won't they? They always do, I said, brushing her silver hair back gently. She nodded, eyes closing. 2 weeks later, she passed in her sleep. No pain, no drama, just peace like she'd always wanted. We buried her on a hill near the town's small lake, beneath an old oak tree. I placed a bouquet of fresh yellow tulips at her grave, wrapped in a ribbon with her initials embroidered on it, L.W. At the funeral, people from all over town came. Her painting teacher, the florist who'd helped her pick out seeds, Sharon from the bank. Marissa from the airport even sent flowers and a note that simply read, "She mattered." She did. And she still does. After the service, I stood alone by the grave, holding one last tulip. The wind brushed against my cheek like fingers, and I swore I could hear her voice say, "Keep going, Emma. Keep blooming." So I did. I finished my degree, and now I work with the Elder Justice Initiative, investigating abuse, advocating for reform, and helping rewrite the narrative for people like her. I still live in her house. I kept the yellow tulips alive. Every year, they bloom brighter. And every spring, I sit on the porch with a cup of tea, look out over that golden fence line, and say the same thing out loud. You didn't just raise a granddaughter, Grandma. You raised a witness. You raised a fighter. And that's enough legacy for a lifetime.